I think both trainers, you know, it's good, it's consistent, I completely understand that, but I'd love to see them flex a little bit more of their teams around.
There are ways to be able to set up for that Zacian mirror, though, in the end game, and we have definitely seen some trainers do just that, making sure maybe speed is in their favor, maybe they're trained in such a way that they're definitely going to be able to take hits from each other, but it is about the speed in the end. But our trainers are getting ready to jump into this game number 1 of round 5 here at the European International Championships. And we will go ahead and see our leads for this very first game, where we've got Nils leading the Incineroar and the Regieleki, and Taran will be bringing out the Zacian and the Whimsicott.
Yep, this Whimsicott can easily set up a Tailwind right off the bat here and just make sure that the rest of the game is there. You need some kind of speed control to match this Regieleki because it's a little bit too fast to deal with without it. So really need to be considering exactly what it can do. That said, I mean, the Incineroar could try and slow it down, a fake out, something that can't really be contested from Taran's side of the field. And then, don't forget, Regieleki can throw out some speed control of its own, not always a consideration. Looks like Regieleki's doing a little bit more than speed control this turn, though.
It does appear that way, as we are going to see that Regieleki get the Dynamax factor. And, you know, I really like this because I think a lot of people underestimate just how powerful a Regieleki Dynamax can be. And when you're able to set up the terrain to that electric terrain and you're able to get the transistor boost on top of that, that can be absolutely big. But the Whimsicott is getting it faked out here, and Regieleki going for a max airstream that's typically off of the move bounce, and so that does show that this might be a little bit more physically trained.
It's definitely a Regieleki that relies on both sides of the attacking spectrum. Zacian fires back with the play rough. That Regieleki takes so much damage, even while it's Dynamax. That's a huge amount of damage down. Not the bulkiest of Pokemon, but the Whimsicott's still around, which is definitely the problem that Nils now has to answer, because the combination fake out max airstream is gone. And now that can set up whatever it wants in this turn. There's no immediate answer to it, and this could be a very quick turn of fortune, I think, for Taran, as Regieleki, yeah, is forced into max guarding here.
Yeah, the Tailwind's going to go off without a hitch here, and that does mean that speed will be mostly matched here. I mean, Nils does get the +1 to the Pokemon, but Taran does get the speed to just the board overall. A big parting shot, though, here from Nils will be able to cycle out that Incineroar in favor of something else. But
gonna need it more than a couple of Intimidate cyclings to get this Regieleki safe. That said, the Calyrex coming in definitely helps out. Definitely a bit more distracting than that Incineroar. I think it's fair to say, you know, the Incineroar did its job turn 1, but now the Incineroar is going to be in the back, and this Shadow Rider Calyrex, yes, it doesn't have the speed boost, yes, it will be moving slower, but you can't just leave it alone, or else it's going to start Astral Barraging you, it's going to start doing huge damage, and that's going to be a problem. So I think Taran's going to be caught between a couple of decisions here, but this is the last turn of Regieleki's Dynamax. It's going to want to use it, and now you've got the Tailwind. Just try and punish it and get an attack in before, as yeah, Nils is forced to remove that. Not even all 3 turns given over to that Regieleki. Not what you want to see.
well, now you get a chance to bring in a more defensive switch, and this is really good heads-up play from Nils. Not many players would feel like they could sacrifice those crucial turns of Dynamax, but wow, a huge reveal from Taran. It's Cotton Sport to be able to harshly drop the speed.
Yeah, Taran is really about moving first in all of these turns, committing to it in a couple ways. The Cotton Sport and the Tailwind, of course. The Calyrex taking that pretty nicely, and ooh, setting up a substitute. So even though the speed is down, it's got a little bit of breathing room for this turn.
Yes, it does. Just a little bit. And what an interesting turn of events, though. The substitute may have been able to go up, but Zacian could remove that pretty quickly. Whimsicott still has access to many different tricks up its sleeve. But wow, that is some big reveals for both of these trainers.
I think it's tough if you target down the Whimsicott right now just to get rid of it, right? Because you don't want to get Cotton Sport continuously. Those are going to stick around. If you deal with the Whimsicott, you're just leaving, of course, that that Zacian to just deal huge damage every single turn. I mean, this Regieleki's not going to be able to take an attack from it. That said, it's going to try and sneak in a little bit, hopefully while this attack's going into the substitute, yep. And then this Calyrex needs to get some damage down. This Calyrex must do something this turn to keep Nils in this game, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, this Whimsicott has been able to stay on the field for so long. Even being able to fire off an energy ball brings the Calyrex pretty low. But Nils went for a nasty plot here.
This is a little greedy on the account of the Shadow Rider Calyrex. This, getting the substitute, getting the nasty plot, great, but you can't substitute again, and you're still not fast enough to try and get any damage done. You're just going to get knocked out. Zacian's still exceptionally fast. The Whimsicott still able to just Cotton Spore everything if it needs to. If there's ever a concern on speed, just Cotton Spore and it'll be absolutely fine. Oh no, you can't Cotton Spore the Incineroar, but it doesn't matter, it's slow anyway. You're able to just outspeed it. This team has been pure aggression from Taran in turn 1, and Nils is trying to pivot, trying to switch. Yeah, the Incineroar's coming back in. Yes, you're getting those Intimidates down on the Zacian, but you're not getting any damage done back to it. Okay, you got it back down to a negative attack stat, but what is getting accomplished here, I think, is my big question. As this Calyrex is just still playing it safe. Yeah, it's annoying that the damage is low for it, but honestly, the Zacian can switch out at any point. Taran's still got 4 Pokemon available.
Well, Nils was playing very patiently, and this patience may be rewarded as the Tailwind does expire. I mean, Cotton Spore still changes things just a little bit because that Calyrex is at -2 speed, but you're continuing to mitigate some of the damage output from this Zacian, and you're still attempting to control the game. I do believe that this Whimsicott has been on the field just a little too long, but wow, Nils doesn't even want to go for that. That nasty plot, plus the substitute, plus all of that time bought just to switch out the Calyrex. Yeah,
that Calyrex not getting anything it wanted done, wanted to stay in and protect. Incineroar finally, though, gets to deal with the Whimsicott with the fake out, the knockout you don't see very, very often. And that's big, I think. That actually opens a lot of doors for Nils now that Cotton Spore is taken off the field.
Yeah, it does. I mean, Zacian has to switch into the Behemoth Blade. It's still, I mean, look at how little damage it's going to do after all of the drops that have come through from Nils Incineroar.
The Intimidate cycling is paying off for Nils. I'm not taking that away from him. I just think, you know, it's a lot of damage that's gone down on the other side of the field, and this Kyogre coming in. Okay, that's a little bit more of, I think, what we wanted. Of course, it doesn't have access to as much speed control, which could be a little bit annoying. Would have liked to be paired with something like the Whimsicott, but it's still a Kyogre. It can still do huge damage, and it limits the options for any switch-ins as well. The Zacian has to stay in and do work, because if either the Calyrex, Shadow Rider, or the Regieleki come in, I think they're just going to get knocked out if a move connects from this Kyogre. So the Incineroar as well, you know, not looking in a too peachy position, doesn't have access to Fake Out, might be able to Parting Shot away, but it may just get caught with an attack first. So really tough decisions to make if you're Nils here. You're just relying so heavily on this Zacian, and if Taran can just work through that, I think things look a little bit better. Nils kind of has to allow the Regieleki to come in naturally. You know, allow that to come in and just use its natural speed to beat this Kyogre off the bat. And the Kartana coming in now, probably feeling pretty good about, you know, getting in at a time when Incineroar's just going to be leaving the field.
Yeah, Incineroar switching back out for this already low Calyrex. I really like the Kartana bring. I think that can be very, very useful here, especially if you want to go for it as a Dynamax option in the following turn. But a Protect now coming through, hoping maybe for the Origin Pulse miss, but it does not. Taran is able to connect onto Nils Calyrex, and that will be knocked out. That Calyrex did very, very little in this game.
The Calyrex accomplished nothing, essentially. I know it sounds harsh, but the Calyrex didn't get any work done. It set itself up and then had to leave. But now, importantly, that's a free switch into your Regieleki, and that's probably what Nils is looking for. He's mapped this board out so nicely to be able to say, you know, oh, it's being able to push on from there. So really like that. Just very, very smart to be able to plan ahead, even though, yes, was he wasting time with the Calyrex? Maybe, but he wasted Tailwind.
That's true. Yeah, while it wasn't able to dish out actual damage, it did buy valuable time, and we were saying that, you know, it might actually pay off with the expiration of the Tailwind, and Nils did kind of have to sacrifice that Calyrex in order to get the Regieleki into this position, but Regieleki really is the best answer that Nils has right now to Taran's Kyogre, especially not really knowing too much right now of how things are trained, but maybe just a bit of a bait here. Gonna go ahead and bring in the Incineroar, maybe favoring a little bit more of saving that Regieleki for later if you're able to deal with the more physical threat of the Kartana on the other side.
Nils is so focused on these Intimidate switch-ins. I'm shocked Taran hasn't tried to try and punish them a little bit more. Seems to be getting them done for free, but the big difference here, Taran does still have access to his Dynamax. That could be a big deciding factor as, oh, the Kyogre switching over into the Dynamax version. Big old smile there as it knows it's set up potentially for success.
Yeah, the rain is set. Kyogre does have the Dynamax factor, and Zacian going for the close combat here. Gonna be a one-hit knockout. Very easy takedown coming through for Nils.
Yeah, Kartana just giving itself up there. Maybe an inclination towards the item now, based on the fact it wasn't able to protect before it got close combated.
Well, Zacian is going to get knocked out to that Max Geyser in the rain. And now it is 2-2 in terms of Pokemon that are left. We have the Regieleki and Incineroar for Nils, and we have the Kyogre and the Zacian here for Taran.
Yep, but this is 2 more turns of Dynamax for this Kyogre, and Taran probably in a great position here. I mean, the Incineroar can't fake out this Kyogre right now because, well, it can't, because it's a Dynamax Pokemon. And that just means you need to land some damage. And the Regieleki, okay, it could try and protect, but it's just going to take the damage through the protect anyway because it doesn't have access to Dynamax. So Taran finding himself a really good endgame board position right here. You know, Incineroar, yes, has to fake out the Zacian. You may as well try and save it here. Regieleki's Thunderbolt is going to be asked a little bit too much of the Dynamax version of this Kyogre.
Yeah, Kyogre is still brought to about half, but will knock out that Regieleki with another powerful Max Geyser, and Incineroar against a Kyogre in the rain.
With one more turn of Dynamax.
One more turn of Dynamax, yep.
It's going to be a tough old ask. Go on, Incineroar. If Incineroar could get a knockout here, I would be impressed. I don't think it's going to, but I would be very impressed. I'll put it that way. Yeah, the Nils is just letting this one play out, letting the attacks land to see what gets the knockout, I guess. If there's any information to be gleaned from the last couple of turns, yep, Incineroar takes a good chunk of damage there. Not very effective, and there's the Max Geyser to wrap up game 1 for Taran Birdee. So Nils, looked like he was finding his way back into the game, but being able to hold that Dynamax for just the opportune moment when the Regieleki was forced to attack you, absolutely huge for Taran.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that game could have gone differently if that Whimsicott had been knocked out to the fake out as well as the max airstream coming through from the Regieleki, but it was barely able to hang on, and then that Whimsicott was able to stick around for a lot of extra value. And of course, Nils was forced into this awkward position of needing to use that Shadow Rider Calyrex defensively.
The Shadow Rider Calyrex bought a lot of time, and getting through the Tailwind, yes, very, very important. But you lost a restricted without it doing any damage, and it's, look at the difference in the two teams. How much did Taran's Zacian and Kyogre combination do compared to Nils's Zacian and of course the Shadow Rider Calyrex? And that is a huge difference maker in so many of these games. So he's going to have to try and bounce back. Just a heads up, he didn't bring the Blastoise, that's all I'm saying. And there's a 1-to-1 correlation on stream. If you don't bring your Blastoise, you don't get the win. So I challenge him to do it. A big thing to note as well in that, if you look at the team selection, the only thing there was the Kartana, which we saw the Zacian can deal with.
Yep. No
Zapdos in that team lineup. So maybe that's something to think about if you're Nils. I mean, I'm obviously just shilling for Blastoise here, but you know, it's a pathway you've got to consider. If you can deal with a Kartana that easily and that readily, why not?
Why not? Definitely a consideration to make for this game number 2. Especially just kind of taking a look at the fact that you weren't able to knock out that Whimsicott as easily as you would have liked to, maybe there does have to be a bit of a different strategy coming through for the second game. The fact that Taran has access to fast speed control, whether it was through the Tailwind or through the Cotton Spore, I think is very, very scary for a team like what Nils is running.
Certainly hurts, the Shadow Rider Calyrex, it should be the focal point of that team. Not what you want to see, getting just Cotton Spored right off the bat, so certainly a little bit harder. And the other thing Nils left at home was also the Rillaboom, which when you consider that you're against a Kyogre team, curious. The Kyogre ran through him at the end, and I'm not saying, maybe that combination towards the end of Regieleki and the follow-up damage from, Grassy Glide would have been enough. But then it's very hard to justify what to drop if you're Nils in this situation. The Incineroar was absolutely huge for cycling and spreading those Intimidates all around. The Shadow Rider Calyrex is one of your restricteds. The Zacian did a very solid job. The Regieleki obviously matches up well against the Kyogre, and it's tough to bring everything so impactfully. There's a lot of choices on this team, and I think Nils is going to be taking his time in team preview today.
I think what's tough about the Rillaboom bring is that you're setting grassy terrain. You don't want to be giving that over so willingly over to a Kartana, and then Kartana and Zapdos are very well known for having access to max airstream. And so it very much depends on how comfortable you feel like bringing the Rillaboom would be advantageous to your game plan rather than a hindrance of something that's just going to get knocked out.
Yeah, the Rillaboom, I mean, the Kartana was just so easily handled, though, that I don't know if I'd be that scared of it. The problem is the Kartana wasn't the focal point of the team. It was almost a distraction. Just saying, okay, well, look over here. Look at my Kartana. Come close combat that. Never mind Kyogre. And that sort of bait and switch, really nicely done from Taran, and I hope that that's something he bears in mind going into game 2. Like, how scared was Nils of that Kartana that he had to close combat it? Yes, it's an easy knockout. Yes, it brings the Pokemon count a little bit closer. But that sort of mentality and that thought pattern, really, really big. Looks like we're getting a change already, though. I do like Incineroar Calyrex a little bit more. Maybe has a better answer to deal with this Whimsicott. Astral Barrage is going to hurt a lot more than, I'd argue, than that Max Airstream. Because bounce off Regieleki, not impressed, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a stumper. It's a little bit of a stumper. I feel like Regieleki that was more trained physically would have been able to get that knockout pretty easily. So don't really know how that Regieleki is trained specifically. But taking a look at the board position right now, I feel like Nils is in a pretty good position, can fake out the Whimsicott, and we know that Shadow Rider Calyrex is pretty fast. So we'll be able to get some big damage off regardless of whether this fake out does hit or not. It does connect, because the Whimsicott is going to stay in, and now the Astral Barrage, we get a chance to see how much this is going to do to both of Taran's Pokemon. Whimsicott does get knocked out there. Much easier this time.
Much better from Nils, being able to just deal with that, get the Grimnay boost as well. Let's never underestimate just how important that is. Of course, you are going to have to take some damage in response, but it's neutral damage, no boost from the Intrepid Sword. So, you may be able to take this. No, not actually at all. A critical hit, making sure of that, as that Calyrex is immediately felled. So 1-for-1 in the opening Pokemon exchange. But it is a restricted for a supported Pokemon, which is probably a trade Taran actually quite likes.
Yeah, depending on what Taran decided to bring in the back, you do have the ability to still control the speed, whether it's through the Zapdos or it's through the Kartana. And regardless of whether or not that Cotton Spore and Tailwind was removed, this is still going to be a bit tough. Nils has the base speed in his favor, with the Regieleki, of course, now coming in instead of that Shadow Rider Calyrex that just got knocked out. But it's the Zapdos in the back here for Taran. Maybe
the Kartana being left at home here, just because it didn't seem particularly impactful in that game. So maybe a nice adaptation from Taran. Obviously, we can't say until we've confirmed the fourth, but I would imagine it's Kyogre. And with that in mind, that puts a lot of pressure on this pair on the board right now for Taran to deal with the Regieleki. The Incineroar, fine, whatever. You see what it can do. It is going to become annoying once again on that Zacian if it lands parting shots and intimidates over and over again, but it's not the real threat. The real threat is the Regieleki.
I figured we would see some Dynamax here.
Yep.
And that's exactly what we're going to see.
yeah, Nils taking that Regieleki and trying to do as much work with it as possible. See if it's got any other interesting max moves to be able to play around with.
Yeah, we've got the Dynamax Regieleki. We'll see whether or not there is an answer of a Dynamax here coming in from Taran. And it looks like there will be, so Zapdos is also going to be receiving a Dynamax Factor. This is what makes things a little bit interesting.
Yeah, 2 electric types, both going for it with the Dynamax. Not really targeting into premium options right now, and the max moves they have availability for is definitely going to be the difference maker here in this game. The Regieleki can match max airstreams, but it's going to be doing negligible damage. Instead of going to boost its speed, it is going to answer the speed of the opposing side, though, with max strike. I really, really like that change up. I do like max strike on Regieleki. You're going so fast, you're lowering speeds, and then you can follow up with your partner Pokemon potentially. But that said, Zacian still going to get to go before this Incineroar.
Yep, Behemoth Blade right into the Dynamax Regieleki. Takes it pretty low, but still going to survive. But where does this Zapdos decide to target with this max airstream? It is also into the Regieleki, so that will be a one-turn knockout onto the Regieleki. Nils now down to his final 2 Pokemon in this game too. Taran could very well clean up the series here.
That's really rough for Nils, losing that immediately again. Just not getting the required value out of this Dynamax Regieleki. Yes, Incineroar gets the parting shot. Leaves the Zacian alone, though, quite interestingly. Can obviously come right back in and land another Intimidate, so lowering the special attack of the Zapdos really, really key there, I think, to make sure that it's not just going to hurt you for the next 2 turns. But yeah, the Zacian coming back in. The Incineroar will have to come back in as well, so that's all 4 confirmed from Nils. Confirmed no Blastoise in the set so far. Or at least not in this game, and that is a little disappointing, but I'll move on and I'll get over it. Maybe.
Well, Incineroar is going to come back out onto the field, get another Intimidate drop onto Taran Zacian. And with that speed drop as well from the Max Strike, Taran Zacian is in a pretty interesting position.
But Zapdos did follow up with a Max Airstream.
It did.
So it gets it back to neutral. What could be cool here is maybe switching out the Zacian, getting rid of those drops, because the Incineroar can't get any more of those drops down. Save that Zacian for late, maybe try and get it in the following turn. This Kyogre could just come in and get some max airstream boosts and start causing a bunch of problems. Yeah,
we're going to see that switch out. Kyogre now, the 4th and final Pokemon revealed, will set the rain. And that means that Zacian can freely come back in and wreak some havoc if it is the final Pokemon on the field. Nils Zacian, though, going to move first. Get a big Behemoth Blade into the Zapdos. It's not quite enough to pick up the knockout, and also the static, getting the paralysis onto Nils Zacian as well. Zapdos able to follow that up with a max airstream, and regardless of which Zacian was faster, now we know for sure Taran Zacian is going to be able to move before Nils does.
It's going to be a tough old turn for Nils in the next one. A paralyzed Zacian, of course, heading into that Zapdos. Yes, you do get to knock out the Zapdos with the throat chop. That's probably going to help a little bit, but it's now just going to be Zacian Kyogre for Taran against a fast... Well, the Zacian's paralyzed, so you're going first. That's the long and the short of it. You're going first. You're going to be able to look at potential water spouts because you know you're going first. You're not going to have to deal with Behemoth Blade beforehand. And then, you know, you've got your full attack stat because of Intrepid Sword.
Yeah, if Zacian wasn't paralyzed, I think this could be a pretty different story. But unfortunately, Kyogre is at full health, able to dish out these pretty powerful water spouts here. In fact, that's exactly what we're going to see for this turn, and it's just a clean double knockout here, and Taran takes the series 2-0.
Yeah, Taran really getting back in that game, turn 1, being able to knock out that Shadow Rider Calyrex immediately after it took the knockout on his Whimsicott, and then just being able to keep up throughout the game and just keep applying